Here's a question I've been asking for a while. Are record companies evil? Is there such a thing as a good record label? Can a record label be good? I need to be upfront and say that I was prompted to ask this question when Taschen Books offered me this Atlantic Records book, which I'll talk about at the end. I don't think this is a sponsored video, but I don't know. They sent me that book for free, and that was cool. I enjoyed the book. I'll talk about it at the end. But it got me thinking. That like the word Atlantic Records, on one hand, to me elicits a vision of Otis Redding and Ray Charles, while at the same time it elicits the image of Lupe Fiasco and a whole bunch of other people who are really upset with Atlantic Records. Like what's the truth? Like what's the truth of what a record label is? Yeah, they asked me to do an Instagram grid. I don't even know what that means. So I'm like, I'll tell you what, I'll just do a video and I'll talk about the book a little bit. Who knows? Maybe I'm a sellout now. But in general, if you talk about a record label, it's usually like synonymous with greed and exploitation. I mean, if you look up record label, just look up record label on YouTube, the first like 10 responses are all like, how record companies scam artists. These record companies scam this way. And it makes sense. Primarily the way that they do things is they don't really give artists a lot of money up front. I mean, they don't really give artists a lot of money. They give them a lot of money up front that they have to pay back, the famous advance. So if I got signed to a record label, they give me $1 million to make my album, to buy my wardrobe, to live while I'm making the album, and I have to pay that all back. And once I've paid that all back, then I can start making money. So a lot of artists just end up never making money because they sign to labels. Of course, labels themselves usually own the masters, which is just terrible terminology that reflects an exploitative practice of owning the rights to the music that the artists themselves create. And it can really just be boiled down to the problem with record labels is the problem with capitalism. It's just capitalist monsters being capitalist. But I'm going to try to propose a different take. I'm going to try to propose maybe just not saying record labels are good, but try to talk about the good things that they do and some of the labels that do things better than others. Because what's funny is when you actually talk about record labels, for the most part, for maybe the last 25 years, they've just been on the decline. I remember my old teacher, who's now a friend of mine, sending me a link or something like back in 2005. It was something like, record labels are dying because of Napster and file sharing. And he just wrote good because he just hated them so much for their history of exploitation. And that's interesting. And they're definitely on the decline because you don't need them anymore. If I wanted to release an album, I could just release an album. I could be independently distributed, and I have 100,000 subscribers. So I could probably, if I decided to sell music, if I decided to make an album and sell it for $30, I could probably sell 100 copies over the span of 10 years. If I sell each of those copies for $30, that's $300 that I make. In order to make $300 with a major label, you're getting fractions and fractions and fractions of whatever it is that is earned, and it would be a lot harder for me to make that level of money with a major label. And that's how people see it, right? I have an audience, therefore I can make a little bit of money if I wanted to. And it's a chicken and the egg thing because record labels are on the decline and they keep consolidating. And it's not clear if they are on the decline because they're consolidating, because there's less interesting voices, because there's less perspective, because it's more of a corporate monolith, or if they're consolidating because they're losing power and they need to, bundle together for warmth. Poor little guys. Which is why if you've studied record labels at all, you know that there's only 3. That's what people say all the time. That's a very aggressive robin behind me. You know that there's just 3, Universal, Sony, and Warner. In that now we have the fire alarm going back there. So, Universal, most of the music you've ever listened to is probably owned by Universal. Interscope, Geffen, Aftermath, Capitol Records, Quality Control, Republic Records, Cash Money, Motown, Island, Def Jam, Verve, Virgin. Most other countries have all of these record labels as well, but especially Universal is very popular in a lot of parts of Europe. So like most of the music you hear, even if it has a different record label on the back, it usually goes back to one of these three. And at least in my case, in my history, it usually goes back to Universal. You know, Sony has Columbia and Epic, and they own Bad Boy and RCA. Warner Brothers has Atlantic, seen back there, has Elektra, Parlophone, Rhino. And what happens is, and this happens to me a lot when I review music, is I think something is on an independent label, and I click on it, and you know just to learn about it, and then it goes back to a subsidiary, and I go, okay, that makes sense, and then that independent subsidiary goes back and up. For the last like 5 years, I've been teaching how No Limit Records is the only truly independent record label in hip hop. That's what I've been saying. That's what I thought was true until today. I looked it up and no, they're owned by EMI, which is owned by Columbia, which is owned by Sony. To further complicate things, there are independent labels. But for you to hear something on an independent label that has not been touched by any major distributors is pretty unlikely. So even the independent labels end up having to use things like the Warner Alternative Distribution Alliance, where smaller record labels use the big ones to get their music out there. That's like, as an example, what TDE does. More on them later. But they are not owned by any of those big three, but they use those big three to distribute the music. And then, of course, the big three get a cut. So they're bad, they're evil. There's only three companies. It's everything that's wrong with capitalism. They're the same thing as Coca-Cola or a cigarette company. They're just pure evil. But let's think about like what makes them potentially positive. Like what role have they played that can be seen as positive despite the capitalistic and therefore inevitably vampiric tendencies that they have? Record labels are gatekeepers with megaphones. I just came up with that. Speaking of megaphones, is that Robin bugging you? You tell me in the comments. This is the Always Positive New Music Review Show hosted by a French professor who's mentally grumpy at a Robin. It's a silly world I live in. Gatekeepers who are also megaphones. Why is that necessary? So let's think about what a gatekeeper is. Gatekeepers in art are people who have some set of standards, who allow some things to pass if they pass a certain criteria and reject other things. In most of the history of art, there's been a high number of gatekeepers. They can be gallery owners, they can be patrons of the arts, they can be record labels, film companies, taste makers, journalists. Gatekeepers actually have an important role in sort of perhaps maintaining a certain level of quality and perhaps even fostering a sense of competition that can lead to more innovation in art. It's complicated. I'm not saying gatekeepers are purely good, but what's true is that right now we live in an era with virtually no gatekeepers. Because, as I said before, if I released a song called Hey Robin, Shut Up, all right? And you click on it, you think, what's this song going to be about? And it's a song about me being mad at that Robin back there sitting on my little play structure. There's a chance I could go viral. I could potentially become a millionaire on Hey Robin, Shut Up. I really possibly could. And there's no gatekeepers except for the audience. And it's tricky because, like, this creates a sort of lack of curation, a lack of sense. Like, when you hear music, you don't know where it's coming from, who's making it, the kind of things they're trying to do. There's no quality control whatsoever. So you can have a hit song made by someone who's been grinding and working at their craft for years, and it finally breaks out. I don't know, like Steve Lacy. Or you can have, I don't know, D'Angelo Ball, like someone's just kind of like goofing around and doing something fun because their basketball career didn't work out, right? Like, that's how it ends up. And this might always seem positive, but it's not. It's not always positive having no gatekeepers, because what happens is you have sort of fake Like you have fake stories that come through. You have other forces that are promoting certain artists or certain things, and you don't know what those forces are. I mean, it's easiest to see in the world of sort of internet content, where often you think, oh, this is some kind of grassroots movement, but actually there's some billionaire who's pushing it all forward. So you're like, oh, this is great. It doesn't have to go through the mainstream media, but really there's someone just as evil, if not more evil, behind the whole thing, pushing it for it to appear to be grassroots. So we live in an era with no gatekeepers, or very few gatekeepers, and then megaphones. So like, how do you get heard? In an era with no gatekeepers, how do you possibly... I've been saying this for years, a little philosophical nugget for the statistically probably very few of you who are watching right now. My channel is not doing so hot right now. It's okay. I appreciate especially you who are watching. That's not even being facetious. But I've been saying for a long time that the skill of the 21st century is not discovery, but discernment. So it's no longer about finding things. It's about discerning between things and trying to figure out like what things are and how they're different. That was before AI. I had that slogan going for a long time. So it's almost impossible to discern, because if you just look up music, there's just too much music, too much videos, too much art, too much stuff coming out all the time. So it all ends up becoming sort of like a basic sound. Much like in my backyard here, there's all these kind of bird sounds, and they're all kind of basic, but that one goddamn robin, he's got the megaphone. Cheep, cheep, cheep. Like, you hear him more than you hear the rest, or her. I don't know why I'm assuming the robin is male. So having a megaphone, having a record label, having a team of people, having a group of people working on making your voice louder actually matters. It actually is an important service that artists just don't have. I mean, I talk about how I could be an independent record label. I could, but only because I have 100,000 viewers, 1/100th of which is watching this video right now, right? Like, it's only because of that I have that audience. And that's what's fascinating when you hear people talk about, like, oh man, why did Drake sign a record label? He could go independent and make way more money. It's like true, but like he could only people like him. Or back in 2007 when Radiohead decided to release their album independently and say pay what you like for it. Like, you could just buy... It was a weird time. They came up with this idea of saying you can buy our album digitally for free. This is before streaming. And you can pay whatever you think it's worth. And everyone's like, this is crazy. This is going to change the world. This is going to be the greatest thing. But like, only Radiohead could do it. Like, they already had the megaphone. Drake already has the megaphone. How do you get your voice above anything? And that's the positive thing about record labels, is they're capable of being gatekeepers with a megaphone for artists. In particular, they're capable, when they are good, of having a particular angle or niche or geographical area. They are able to create a sense of community. They're able to create in the consumer, and I mean that in the less crass sense, not the person who pays, but the person who listens, the listener. Like, this is probably going to be good. Like this, it might not be great, it might not be to my taste, but it'll probably be good. If I see the letters TDE on a record, I know it's going to be good because it's Top Dog Entertainment. And I think record labels, what's good and bad about them is best seen in hip-hop. Their most predatory practices are creating 360 deals in which they take cuts from everything an artist does, ridiculous advances, and not hiring lawyers for rappers to represent rappers suing the record labels themselves, all sorts of shady stuff. But also, like hip-hop, when I teach a class, right? I teach a class on hip-hop. And record labels are so important in the rise because they were a means of being a gatekeeper and of being a megaphone. And Top Dog Entertainment is the best example. It's independently owned. It is. It's not actually owned by any of the big three, but it's always distributed by the big three. And they are gatekeepers. They don't sign just anybody. Lefty Gunplay is not on Top Dog Entertainment. He's a good rapper. He works with people on there or who have been on there, but he is not of that level. They have a very strictly curated staff of singers and producers and rappers and all that. And those people have to pass the TDE bar. And because of that, us as listeners, we know if it says TDE, it's probably going to be pretty good. Read My Soul had a video recently talking about the Joey Badass versus the West debate, where he talked about how the problem with East Coast is that it doesn't actually have a TDE. And it's true, and it's weird, because it used to. It used to. It used to be that if Bad Boy Records was releasing an album, it was probably going to be really good. Unless it was a Puff Daddy album. Unless it was by the guy who actually owned the record. But they had a really good run in there. Or Def Jam is the best example. I mean, it used to be. Even back in my day, it used to be. If you saw the word Def Jam, you could just buy that sucker. You could just buy that CD. you just buy that tape. Because whatever they were doing was such high class, like such well thought out, well curated rap record label that you could do that. But of course now Bad Boy is owned by Sony. Def Jam is part of the Universal monster. And now if I see Def Jam, I just kind of go, yeah, and this is probably not going to be so good, right? I don't know why it sounded like RFK Jr. there. It's probably not going to be so good. Or something like QC Records, which again is owned, distributed by somebody. That's a good question. But QC Records in Atlanta, another perfect example. The Lil Yachty to Migos. So much of the great music of Atlanta came through Coach K, the person who runs QC Records, figuring out how to sign and show what was happening. Or Rap-A-Lot Records in Houston, somebody who saw the scene and figured out how to make it. Or Death Row, or hell, look at New Orleans with Cash Money and No Limit Records. Like just all these record labels who are capable of curating, of gatekeeping, and then promoting. And I could just keep on going with hip hop, like Cold Chillin' and Loud and Tommy Boy. There's so many examples. Like I'm just going to run out of time for how useful they have been. And there's a Joe Charnas book called The Big Payback: The History of Business and Rap Music, which is worth reading. There's a lot of good stuff about record labels in there. But let's say you're not even talking about hip hop right now. You know, I mean, so what's funny is that my interactions with record labels are actually fairly common now because I get a lot of emails because I have 100,000 subscribers, right? Thank you so much. Smash the like button, AVAA. And it's weird because sometimes like I have like a relationship, but like it doesn't upset me at all because take example Dead Air Records, okay? Like, how do you possibly capture the zeitgeist when the zeitgeist is like 1,000 million kids in their bedrooms making glitchy, making weird kind of music in their bedroom? How do you gatekeep that? Dead Air is a great example of how to do that. If Dead Air releases something, I always know it's going to be an interesting album. It's going to be very young and of the moment. It is probably going to be glitchy or hip-hop related or hyper-pop related or somewhere in that general zone. But I will know that it will be good because I trust they've had Quadica, they've had Quanic, they've had Underscores, they've had Jan Remover, they had Lucy Bedrock. I released a review of Lucy Bedrock yesterday, right? That I know they're probably going to be pretty good. And so like what? So like those guys are bad? You know? Like they're bad? I mean, I guess they could be. But for me, it's hard for me not to feel that they are doing something important. Same thing, you know, Fat Possum with Gaius Guevara and Fievel is Glauc and Honey Glaze. I mean, they contact me and I don't like everything they send me, but I mean, what am I supposed to do? You know, Ninja Tune, Black Country New Road, and Blockhead, and K-Tempest. I mean, these are really interesting companies that figure out a way to highlight and help people discover music and help artists be discovered. Probably the most interesting one that I'm thinking of right now is a mini major or a major minor, a major indie. There's a thing called Beggars Group, and they are essentially like the UMG of indie record labels because they own Rough Trade, 4AD, XL, and Matador. And, Matador owns, like True Panther, who I just talked about the other day, that have Oaklu, Model Actrice, Lauren Otter, True Panther's a pretty major label. And, Model Actrice just said them. And, that's kind of interesting because they, I want to say they're evil because they're a conglomerate, but, each one of those, if I see something's on Rough Trade or I see something's on XL, I know it's probably going to be good. So I don't know. That's interesting. I think up until they get purchased by UMG, I think we just need to see them as a way of, again, creating a stronger megaphone for perhaps a more diverse gatekeeper. I do also need to spend 1 second talking about my daughter's history because she was a super goth kid and super into Fueled by Ramen, which is just owned by Warner. But still, that's a good example of how subsidiaries of even major label companies can have some kind of oversight and can help curate. And even if all the money is going back up to the ghouls who own stock in Warner Brothers, it still has that function. And she also said, Dad, if you talk about record companies, you have to talk about Vada Vada. So I don't know. Vada Vada is like the garden. I don't know what. But that's a perfect example where my daughter knows if something's on Vada Vada, she's going to like it. And so she just has that faith. So, what do they even do? They find, distribute, and market. That's what they do. They find A&Rs. And they have A&Rs, artists of representation, who find artists. They distribute the art and they market it. And they do things like contacting me and put advertisements in your inbox. And it's all connected to the history. So my whole life, if I actually look back at it, has been, in music, has always been connected to these labels. I grew up in the 90s where the words Sub Pop meant something. That was the label that Nirvana used to be on, and Soundgarden, or there was the Sub Pop of Boston, which was called Tang Records. But even going back, if you just look on the backside of your record collection, you'll see something like Stax. Everything Stax released, they were out of Memphis. Everything they released was incredibly good from 1964 to 1975. Even it's unbelievable the amount of curation they were able to do. Famously, of course, Motown, there's an entire sound based on a record label. It's not that there weren't other artists doing those things. It's that those were the artists who were let past the gate and given the megaphone by the record company. Which I guess then leads us into the part of this video where I talk about this book. Again, I'm super uncomfortable. Let's talk about Atlantic Records, okay? I'm going to pause this so I can get the book closer. I'm going to pause. So, yeah. I feel so awkward doing this. So this is the giant-ass book that they sent me. They also sent me something to do an affiliate link. So you look down there and you tell me, have I figured out how to do an affiliate link? I have never done that before. So if you want to order this book or anything else by the good folks at Taschen, actually, I don't know if they're good folks. Are Taschen good folks? They do make a lot of books that I like, so I'm tempted to think they are, but I'll just say the folks at Taschen. So they sent me this big-ass coffee table book, more like it is a coffee table because it's so heavy, but it's all about Atlantic Records, and it's what spawned this video, okay? So Atlantic Records is a great example of Chumbawamba, is a great example of what a record label can be for good and for ill. You see here the cover. Already they put Clapton on the cover. Come on, Taschen. I don't know if you're going to watch this, but you're Atlantic Records. Why are you putting Eric Clapton, the suckiest of all musicians, on the cover? It's a cool picture though. So it's founded by Ahmet Ertegun, an artist, a record producer, so cool that Frank Zappa named his son after him, And in the early days, and you can see this in the book, how am I possibly going to show you this on the book? In the early days, you see this in the book, they were the one, I guess I'll do it like this. I'll do this like my radio. I like it loud. You have kind of your Ray Charleses, you have all these early great jazz and R&B artists, and they are and really, truly, when I would talk to my dad, he would say that he would go down to the record store and just pick up the New Atlantic. Whatever it was, he knew. We're talking the coasters in there. So this book has lots of beautiful high quality images of, we got Bobby Darin, while at the same time you've got Charlie Mingus, like they were doing so much. They're having all these amazing, like if you ever get Giant Steps by John Coltrane, do you have that album? That's some pretty crazy stuff. And they're, that was all in Atlantic as well. They were using their power, their distribution ability, their curation, the fact that my dad would say, hey, if it's on Atlantic, it's probably good. That was legitimately what he felt. The same way that my daughter feels about Vada Vada Records and that I feel about Top Dog Entertainment is the way that many people of my father's generation thought about Atlantic Records. And who could say they're wrong when you got Aretha Franklin on there? But then we also get to the problem, because that's how this all is here. You got Otis Redding, goddamn, how much music, Atlantic Records, have I listened to? Quite a bit. Wilson Pickett, Sam and Dave. Turns out Sam and Dave are Trumpy. Very weird. Very weird. I've never quite understood that. But then in 1967, they were purchased by Warner Brothers Records. And here is more of the good, the bad, and the ugly of this whole thing, right? Because they're purchased by Warner Brothers Records, which is great because now they have more reach, they have more distribution, they have more power. But also, they lose the plot. They're not really anymore this label about R&B and jazz. They're just a label about whatever might sell, and they use their A&Rs to find different artists. Different artists like... Jesus Christ, this book is heavy, Tashin. Could you send me the softcover? Like Led Zeppelin. So, like, what does Led Zeppelin and Otis Redding have in common? Do you know? Okay, they both make black music. That's true. One of them steals it, the other one doesn't. But they're both on Atlantic. So we start to see it get a little bit diffused. We start to see what they are as a record label, what their meaning is, get diffused. And so then all of a sudden you have AC/DC, Back in Black. You've got the Rolling Stones on there. You got Willie Nelson and George Carlin. We are just going all over the place. And if you keep on going, I gotta stop hitting the computer here. If you kind of keep on going, then we get to this. Okay? How do we end up here? How do we end up there with Lil' Kim? You know what I'm saying? Like, now, Atlantic Records, when I see something is on Atlantic, no offense, Atlantic, but I don't say this is a mark of quality. I just say this is just some record label that just puts stuff out. Okay, so yeah, great picture. You know what? Oh, I could do this. Oh my God, look, this is way better. So, I could, they got Panic at the Disco. So, that's cool. My daughter sure like that. Is that 100 gex? Like, did you know? I didn't know. 100 gex was on Atlantic. So there you go. And also, not for nothing, this book is good because you have 100 gex and Ray Charles in the same book. Oh, shit. Wait. Is this still... Okay. All right, so, but like, what's the through line? The shine down. The through line is like, I don't know what it is. Twista and Fat Joe, and it's all just kind of out of the place because we're talking to subsidiaries within subsidiaries within subsidiaries within subsidiaries. And it kind of loses Corday. It kind of loses its function. Gucci Mane. I bought a Gucci Mane CD the other day. Missy Elliott's on Atlantic? I didn't know that either. And it all ends up being this random thing where they could all... Hey, Rico Nasty. I just reviewed Rico Nasty last week. Look at that. Okay. All right. So if you want a reason to buy this book, that is right there, a high-quality picture of Kodak Black. Anyways. Hey, Lil Uzi. Vert. So there's... Jack, look at the guy. All right. So I guess you get the point. Maybe. Goddamn. So I guess use my affiliate link. I guess, hey Tashin, if you want to send me that Shining book, I would love it. You want to thank me for this clumsy? Because hey, do you know what people want in advertising the most is authenticity. This has been a super authentic plug if I've ever done one. So you want to just kick me over that Shining book? I'll do an Instagram. I'll do an Instagram panel. I'll do an Instagram grid. I will do the gritty on Instagram for the Shining book. Anyways, there's my meditation on record labels. Are they good? Are they bad? You know the deal by now. If a professor ever asks you is something good or bad, the answer is always both. There's the camera.